Be brave, be bold, and take action.
Beautiful. Be brave, be bold, and take action. If people will do that, we will live in a much better society.
I think so. I hope so. But do it with love, not hate.
With love, exactly.
With love. Be bold with love. Be courageous with love, and take action with love. Yeah.
Welcome to the Break Free podcast. I am your host, David Mancela. As everybody knows, this podcast is shining the light in these times of confusion. It almost feels like it's the last days. Don't you guys feel that? If everything is so dramatically changing, if you will. We started 2024 with a 7.6 magnitude earthquake in Japan. And then I did more research. Within 1 week, we had 800 earthquakes around the world. But instead of focusing on that type of sad news, this podcast was created to shine the light with the people that are making this world a better place, for the people that are actually creating hope by the organizations they lead. And today we have with us a great example of that. Maureen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's so nice to be with you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Maureen, for the audience, can you tell me your full name? Where do you live and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, sure. My name is Maureen Sedonaen. I'm the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco in the Bay Area of California. And I live in Berkeley, California.
Wonderful. And what do you do?
So I'm the CEO of Habitat for Humanity, and we build and preserve affordable home ownership for low-income people. We're part of a national network of affiliates, of 1,000 affiliates across the United States. And we do something that's very unique. A lot of affordable housing, the majority of affordable housing is rental housing, which is very needed and very necessary. But we also believe there's a strong need and a strong moral imperative to create opportunities, particularly for low-income folks of color, to be able to become homeowners. And so we really work with those folks and other low-income folks in communities across America. And here in the Bay Area, where it's the most expensive place in probably the world to live, we really feel every day that we're called to do this work and to make these opportunities happen so people can start to build equity, they can stabilize their families, their children can go on and have better education, and all kinds of outcomes that happen as a result of being a Habitat for Humanity homeowner.
That's beautiful, Maureen. And especially in these days where homelessness is through the roof, the economy is so sour that people cannot even afford to buy a house, and some people are having struggled even making up rent. Habitat for Humanity is in Canada too. That's where I'm residing, and you guys are doing a fabulous job. And this is one of the things that I love about the free enterprise, the free economy, countries that have the right to choose their governments. Because, for us in a democracy that we live, we choose our leaders, and if we don't like them, we can change them.
Yes.
And sometimes we choose the wrong leaders, and the wrong leaders create their own environments, especially in the economy, that affects the people. But it goes in cycles. So it gets better, it gets worse, it gets better, it gets worse, but hopefully it gets better overall, right?
Yes. And I think, you highlight an important point, which is, there's a whole ecosystem of affordable housing, from the unhoused, which is a huge crisis also in this country, all the way to affordable homeownership and everything in between. And sometimes we spend a lot of time battling what's more important, or what's a more important need, or how are we going to do this, or what amount of money is going to solve this. And I think the answer is, in many cases, we don't actually know in some places. So we keep trying things. We keep doing, social architecting and engineering. But in affordable home ownership, it's pretty straightforward. So we start with a piece of land. We build that piece of land in partnership with our community, our business community, our faith communities, our families themselves that are going to live in the homes. And we build these homes like the beautiful ones you see behind me in San Francisco. And then through a lottery process, families get selected, but they have to have good credit. They have to be ready to become homeowners. They have to be They most often are people that live and work in the community and have for years or decades.
Yeah.
And then they start a journey for their families, which really creates outsized outcomes, which is really amazing. And so my argument or my fight is always like, let's put more money in home ownership. Let's shift the dollars. Because for a lot of folks, like my family I was one of 12 children, and my family became homeowners because my father was in World War II, and as a veteran had access to the GI Bill to be able to get a down payment and an affordable mortgage to purchase a home in New Jersey. But his friend, who's African American, didn't have the same access. So he was racially excluded from that opportunity, even though he served and fought with his country in the same way that my father did. And so that's wrong. And so we have to work, and have been working for years to do this. Habitat for Humanity organization was founded on the tenet of radical inclusiveness. And it was an integrated farm in the deep South in the late 60s and early 70s that sort of emerged this organization to say, we got to do something about this. And if we bring people together, if we call people in instead of calling them out, if we find a way to work together, we can make this happen. And now, of course, they're working across the United States and in 70 countries of the world.
70 countries. Wow. Yeah. I thought it was only North America.
Yeah. No.
Wow.
No. Yeah. So it's really quite something. And I think the other thing that, for us in our region that really brings us hope is, as you said, it's a hard time right now. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering in the world, but there's also a lot of hope and a lot of healing, and communities are making this happen. So I'll give you an example. This house, this development behind me in my photo, or it's this home in San Francisco. There was one home donated by a 96-year-old man, and it was his mother's home. And she was a chemist in San Francisco in the 50s, which was also pretty unheard of at the time. But she also hung out with artists and big thinkers, and Ruth Asawa and Buckminster Fuller and all of these people. And she was very much a Renaissance woman. And so Misha Seligman and his wife Brigitte, in her honor, donated this home to us. And the home was not in great shape, but it's in a beautiful neighborhood. So we took that home down and we built 8 homes. And just in the last 2 weeks, these 8 families have moved into their homes, and they're settling in and starting their journey as homeowners. And so it's just such a remarkable, gift, because hundreds of people, thousands of people actually, over 25,000 volunteer hours, over, millions of dollars donated, lots of public support and public subsidy from the government, both state and local, Mayor's Office of Housing stepping up in a big leadership way, made this happen and transformed this community, that now these homes will forever be affordable, because when those families have raised their children and they might want to move or sell their home or move into a market rate home, they sell that home back to us. We fix it up and we get another family, and the journey starts over. We're also the mortgage lender. So we're helping them build that credit, that equity that they can use when they move forward. So it's really is a story of not only hope and sort of determination, but it really is a self-efficacy story for these families and for these communities to actualize something so beautiful together that makes so much sense.
Oh my God. You must be so fulfilled having that job. Like I tell people, this is the Break Free podcast because I interview people that have a life of freedom. And freedom is different for every single person. My freedom is being able to bless the world with these interviews.
Yes.
Your freedom is incredible, right? Like your freedom is blessing people with these properties. And I tell you what, I'm a man of faith. And you started saying that people of faith donate, businesses donate, government donates. Like, the entire community gets together to bless other people, and this is a testament that the right of property, the right of deciding what you want in life, is above and beyond, better than any other social system in the world. Because if you see what's happening right now with your organization, you are filling up a void for families that otherwise couldn't afford a house. You are changing people's life, but not only the people that are getting into that house, you're changing generations.
Totally.
Because home ownership is the single differentiator between poverty and having a stable financial life.
Exactly. And and I think we underestimate it. And the other part is we're not giving these homes away. These families are buying these homes. They're
Mhm.
purchasing these homes with their hard-earned money, like so many of us have had the privilege to do. And I think that that's the other thing. Sometimes the people say, "Well, you give homes away." And I'm like, "No, we don't. We're not, we're not Oprah. We don't go, you get a home and you get a home." We're like, "Hey, let's partner. Let's do this together." And it totally is faith in action. It's all faiths. It's this incredible sort of linking of arms and linking of the power of destination for people for good. And also just the hope and the sort of, San Francisco is getting a lot of negative press right now across the world. And, the truth is it's a beautiful city with beautiful people making extraordinary things happen. We have our problems. Yes, we do. And we need to own those and we need to work together in the same way to address and fix those. But we also have to know that we can do it. And this is
Mhm.
not insurmountable. And we don't have to believe the stories and the narrative that somehow this has shifted and changed. We have been a world-class city since we were founded, and we will always be one. And we need to just lean in, and I think as, my friend Latifah Simon says, many are called and few are chosen. We're chosen to do this work, and we need to lean into it and move forward in our faith and in our work and in our actions. And our actions need to follow our words. And I think that that's the thing that, if we're trying something and it's not working, well, we're smart people. Let's stop that and figure out what do we need to do to change it. If we need to elect people that aren't going to support this and stop trying to fight it, we need to do that. And it may take months, days, years, but we need to keep our vision clear and we need to keep our path forward. And for me, knowing that the children of these homeowners, that their lives are going to be transformed by this incredible dedication and hard work of their parents is like, it's just so good. I mean, it's just pure goodness. And I just think it's like, and we see it where 21% of our homeowners went to college, 65% of their children go to college. That's in one generation.
Wow.
So it's working. It's working. Yeah.
Yeah, Maureen, that mentality is what changes cities. And it has to start by the individuals, by the people that actually live in the cities. And when the people finally come together, if you had enough, you have the power to change whatever is blocking you, right? So, for example, in this case, let's say I'm not saying you have a bad government, but let's say your government is the one causing this. Well, you voted that government in, you just got to wait to change it. And if enough people think the same way, you will actually change it. I'll give you an example. The country of El Salvador, it's a tiny Central American country underneath Guatemala. That's where I'm from. I'm from Guatemala. This country has been in a civil war for over 35 years. After the civil war ended, they got flooded with gangs. Over a million people left the country to the United States during the war. And a lot of these people, some of them were actually very bad people, and they started creating ghettos in California, actually, in this Los Angeles area, mostly. By the time Bill Clinton came around, what he did is he just grabbed all of them, all the gang members, and he shipped them back to El Salvador. But he never cared to tell the government officials that they were actually really bad people, that they deserved to be in jail. So they were let loose, they went back, and these guys started doing what the guerrillas did, recruiting 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds. Before you knew, the civil war was replaced by an internal war between gang members and the population.
Wow.
And they were under that attack for more than 20 years. El Salvador had more deaths during the day than people were having deaths in countries at war. Imagine that. But guess what? In 2019, they changed the government. They put somebody in power, a man of faith. And in 4 years, they cleaned shop. Wow. Now it's one of the safest countries in the whole continent of America. So Canada is the safest. El Salvador is the second safest. And now people from the United States, for example, the governments from local towns in the states of New York, they are going down to El Salvador to figure out what they did to clean shop.
Right, to do a study session. Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't organized. It was the people had enough. They changed the government, and then they allowed the government to get the rules that they needed to get in order to clean this nonsense. And now it's a very safe country. Now they're attracting foreign investment. Like, this country is going to prosper in the next 10 years, you will see it's an anomaly, it's a blessing, but it's a testament that anything that is wrong could be changed as long as the people had enough and they're willing to do whatever it takes to do that change.
Yes, exactly. And I think, also that you're willing to walk with integrity, and you're willing to be transparent, and you're willing to have to say some of the hard things. Like, we can't, I think that's one of the things that's challenging in our work and challenging in a lot of people's work in this sector. It's like, it's really hard to do what we do because it's very regulated. It's highly regulated industry. It's very, complicated. There's not a lot of funding, all of these things. And if we just sat back and said, well, we just can't do it because it's, we just wouldn't get things done. But what we've done at our affiliate that we're really proud of is we said, no, you know what, we're going to double our impact in the most, we have a housing crisis, and the word crisis means we need to solve something. We need to come together, much of like what you just described in El Salvador. And we need to say, we are going to fight. We are going to push for public policy. We are going to look for or community organizing and bringing people in. We are going to connect people across faiths. We are going to connect people across ideology. We're going to connect people across, geographic bounds in a community, so that the people that have so much privilege and were maybe born rounding third can understand why other people need an opportunity and a ramp to get there. And building that ramp doesn't weaken anyone, it strengthens them. It doesn't weaken a community, it strengthens a community. And so what we've seen is our homeowners then become school board members, they become soccer coaches, they become a church, volunteer that's running the church youth group. And so all kinds of things happen as a result of people being able to have stable housing where they know what their costs are going to be, they can plan for their future, they can say, this is my community. And for most of them, it's been their community, but they've had to move around. They're overcrowded. They're living in a 2-bedroom home with 4 children and 2 parents, all kinds of things that are, in comparison to the globe, of course, are not, sort of that magnitude of discomfort. But it's still really hard to be a young person and be in school and not have a place to study and do your homework. It's still really hard for a parent who wants the best for their children to have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to feed them and for them to thrive. So if we can create some stability, if we can say, hey, you know what, there's an opportunity for you to become a homeowner, and we're going to make this happen with a whole bunch of people coming together and a whole bunch of systems coming together, like, how blessed are we to be able to do that? And I guess I just feel that every day. I was just this morning reading an email from a homeowner who just sent me an email. They had just moved in a couple of weeks ago, and she just said, I just want to, thank you again. And we're settling in, and every day I have a smile on my face. And I was just like, oh, yes, okay. Me too.
Maureen, what a blessing to have you in this podcast, really. What got you into this type of work? How did you get here?
Well, I've always, I grew up in a very large family, and I think that, part of my journey certainly was, being, and I went to Catholic school from, by the time I was born until I was in college. And, so part of that was sort of built into it, service to community, service to others. And so I got pretty involved as a volunteer. I was in youth groups, I was in a Girl Scout, I did all sort of things like that. And then when I went to college, I was working in the dormitories. And so I was an RA working with students as a resident advisor, helping them adjust to college life and, try to be successful. And with that came, sort of a lot of trials and tribulations and a lot of really incredible transformations that I saw with young people. And then when I was and when I was a younger adult, I founded a youth organization called the Youth Leadership Institute. And the reason that I founded that organization was because I was, I was in my mid-20s and I had 2 small children myself. And people would ask me to come and represent the youth voice at a particular meeting or a coalition meeting or something. And I was always a little struck by that. Like, why don't we ask the young people whose lives are being affected by this, and certainly having been trained in community organizing, it was like, I'm not the authentic voice of a 16-year-old. I need a 16-year-old's authentic voice at the table. So we founded this organization to basically put young people at decision-making tables and help them succeed. And part of that was helping them understand research and evaluation and data, understanding the problem, how to identify problems and solutions in their communities, and also how to build a movement and come together and get other young folks involved. And so that organization is still going very strong. They're in California as an organization across the state, and then they work all over the country and nationally, training governments and foundations and youth organizations on how to engage young people to work meaningfully and in allyship with adults in issues that impact them. And that was just a great journey. I had a couple decades there, really, really enjoyed it. And then I sort of stayed in the social impact space. So I went from there to working for a company that puts healthy food in schools, particularly for low-income kids. And that was really transformational to see when kids didn't have Cheetos for breakfast, when they actually had a nutritious breakfast with protein, that they did better in school and that they had a better day and that their behavior was actually better. And then from there, I worked at Goodwill for a few years, helping them do some of their workforce work and, their leadership in that space. And then came to Habitat. And, I also been pretty involved in philanthropy, working with a couple of foundations and sitting on the board of a foundation. So I've learned on the giving side how important that strategic gift is and how that partnership matters. It's not just about giving someone money and sending them forth and saying, good luck. It's really a partnership about how you work together to address and solve social problems. How are you a connector with folks who are in that space, who are trying to solve something, whether it's homelessness or, after school programs for kids, or helping kids get to college, or, helping people move out of poverty into a sustainable life where they're thriving and they have work and they have meaningful purpose in their community. And so I have been so blessed to have so many intersections and parts of my work that aren't really about an issue. They are about a strategy. And that strategy really is about being human-centered and and working with people to, really achieve their best and be their best selves, and then working in community to create the conditions for things to work. Because so many times it's the policies or the conditions that get in the way. It's not the people. It's not like the people want a bad condition. They don't. It's just such a, we look at, homelessness in America, and you can trace a lot of it back to when, a lot of the mental health supports and institutions went away. You can trace it back to when we had this outsized job creation that you had to have a certain bit of a college degree to get a job in many places, and then also offshoring all of our manufacturing. And so now, here we are 30 years later going like, well, how did that happen? And you're like, well, let's unpack it, and I think we're making strides to rebuild that, and we're not perfect in any way, but I think it does, as you said, it starts with a small group of people, and then it grows, and then it grows more. And then people look at models. We can't figure everything out. Sometimes we have a little bit of an arrogance in the United States where we think like, well, we know best. And, sometimes we don't know best. So we need to be able to be open to learn and listen and work with folks and meet people where they are and go from there.
It's amazing, Maureen, that you're a classic example of how having a solid education when you're a child creates a solid person when you're an adult. And I say that because, I was born Catholic too. I went to church. I received Jesus as my Lord and Savior when I was 16 years old. I got married at 17. I had a kid at 18. I moved to Canada at 19. Like it was like And then we stayed in church for 10 years. It was beautiful, Holy Spirit-filled church. And then I got into personal development. I really wanted to grow my businesses. I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I wasn't an entrepreneur yet. So to make the long story short, I lost my faith. I stopped going to church. I forgot what my grandma, taught me, what my mom taught me. And I just was so hungry and focused for money that when I was achieving the goals that I set to myself, they were not filling up my heart. And then I would do something crazy 10 times more than I had, and I would achieve that, and the whole would be bigger. Until I finally came to realize, what about God? What about the people? What about that? Why do you think I do this? But I don't want to talk about my story, like your story. The one thing that I did when I came back to my faith 2 years ago was, Lord, I need to read your word. So I started reading the Bible from cover to cover. And, it clearly says there that if you, when you have children, if you teach them the fear of the Lord, if you teach them to love God, they will never lose their path. And part of that is what you just said, part of that is how do you help the most needed, right? How do you clothe the naked? How do you feed the hungry? How do you house the homeless? How do you push people forward that are the marginalized people? That we are so blessed that we live in this North American continent where most of the people are well off. Most of the people, according to world standards, are very well off.
Yes.
There's still a lot of people that fall into the cracks, and who like we are called to help those people. You know, when I see Christians in these days, I want to see more their works and not their words. And that's why I try not to talk about my faith too much, right? I want people to see my works because it's the works that shows the kindness, right? And you're a clear example of that, right? Look at what you said, like your impact during your youth gave you your career opportunity, and now you're actually changing your community in a big way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I sure hope so. I mean, that's my aim. And and I do think one of the things is I've gotten older and I've seen it, and I've sort of gotten involved in looking at faith and spirituality. To me, it people should choose their faith, choose their faith path. I think God is bigger than all churches, and lives in people's hearts, and it does live through people's actions. So even for people who are like, hey, I don't go to church, or I'm not in that. It's sort of like, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you living and manifesting this goodness? And I think that and then remembering and reminding how blessed we are to be able to even have that choice, right? And so I think just, for me, it's so much of it is that connection of, and it really is, it sounds a little bit, corny or whatever, but it's sort of like, it really is, choosing, hope and love over fear and hate, right? And I think that, it's, and that's oversimplifying something, but I think it's really important. And I think one of the challenges is sometimes the hate rhetoric gets politicized and used against people who are marginalized in order to keep them down. And what I'm trying to, do in my life is to say, no, we're going to lift people up, and we're going to lift their stories up, and we're going to not let hate marginalize them anymore, not persecute people anymore. We're going to lift people up and live by example. And that example is going to be in those works, not in those words.
Beautiful. So well said. What major did you take in college?
I was actually a psychology major.
Psychology major, wonderful.
Yeah.
So what was your first job right after school?
Right after school, I actually worked in an alcohol and drug treatment program. And it was really an interesting experience and a powerful experience for me, because I had grown up in a family where there was a lot of substance abuse, and I saw the downside of that firsthand as a child and as a young adult. And then when I was studying counseling and psychology, I went to work at this center. And what I learned was, and now we call it trauma-informed work, right? But what I learned was what so many people who came through our doors seeking help had a very traumatic background. And so they had many things happen to them. And that doesn't excuse their addiction or excuse the behaviors that they engaged in around that addiction. But what it does is it gives you a context in which to work. And part of it is people need healing alongside the self-efficacy, right? So you can't just be like, straighten up and fly right and go get a job and you'll be fine and just stop using drugs, because it's not that easy. And so and the big thing I learned too is that there's not enough empathy and compassion that we have sort of hardwired into us as humans. We do need to practice it. We need to practice it every day. And so for me, I try to start my days with a prayer or meditation about what I'm grateful for, how I need to walk my own talk, how I need to show up for people, and that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? And so all of these things that, help ground me in my work, but also know that for people that are, in a transformational part of their lives and need to make a change for whatever reason, whether they are highly successful business people and they feel unfulfilled, or they're homeless and on the street and, they need help and they need recovery, or they have a mental health problem and they need medication, or people are so disowned by their family for their sexual orientation, or whatever it is, like we need to find space for people to heal. And we need to find that place that people can feel like a sense of belonging. I think that, it's interesting. There's an institute at UC Berkeley now, and it's really looking at this othering and belonging world. And I've been, kind of following them and thinking a lot about it, which is when we other people, it's really easy to kind of disconnect from them emotionally and not have a feeling of responsibility or calling to care for them as our brothers and sisters. But when we don't do that, when we include them, when we, there is no other, it's all of us, it's harder to do that, right? And so I think it's like, those are some of the things that I learned in my early experiences in my career, and a lot with young people. When I worked with young people, so many times they came and said, we're asked to pick out the colors of a flyer, or, show up at a meeting and talk about why young people matter, and then we don't get any power. And power sharing is something that is not easy for people. It's not easy inside companies. It's not easy inside of nonprofit organizations, because people have, a lot of responsibility with that. And so they take that very seriously. But I think in our community, we have to understand that really the power is in the collective. And that's where the change can happen, as you stated so eloquently earlier. And I think that, what I see in housing is it's just as important for me to build a relationship and help speak up for someone who's trying to do something that's not what I'm trying to do, but to be an ally and be a support and help push their thing forward. And then when I need help pushing my thing forward, they can help.
Maureen, I try to make this podcast in a way that one episode, the people that listen to it will feel like they read one of the best books of the year. And this is becoming that episode, the stuff that you're shining the light on, the whole idea of addiction and misbehavior in adults. Everything has a beginning. And what you're seeing is the fruit of an abusive childhood. You're seeing the fruit of pain so radically instilled in the person's body that they run to substances, or they run to behaviors that are not correct in order to numb that pain. So now what I do is, instead of seeing the addiction, I see the heart. I see the broken heart. I see the pain. And the Lord allowed me to experience something like that in a very tiny way. I'll tell you my story. When the Lord rescued me from the pit of hell, when I thought I was, I went so bad that I thought I was God. That's, the enemy came and told me, yeah, you are God. So I was telling my wife, I was God. Imagine that bad. It was that bad. I almost lose everything. I almost lose my wife, my kids, my businesses, everything. My arrogance went through the roof. But when the Lord got me out of hell and he broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, because I had a heart of stone, and he gave me a heart of flesh that could feel again. One of the things that he showed me supernaturally is that I had ADHD. And I didn't know. And so, me being supposed to be this successful business entrepreneur and, that conquered the world and blah, 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 I wouldn't accept it. I wouldn't accept that I had a mental condition. So I went to 3-4 specialists. I flew to Guatemala to get the best psychiatrists in the country after seeing the best in North America. And all of them told me exactly the same diagnosis. Yes, you do have ADHD. And so I was like, my God, I've been living with this since when? So then I allowed my psychiatrist to do a psychoanalysis even to my father that, is in heaven already. And turns out that my father had it. And then he analyzed my childhood. And so he said, these mental conditions are, number one, they're inherited. And also they are created by severe trauma when you're a child. So what you do when you grow up, you don't know why you're attracted to the substances. You don't know why thank God I never became addicted to anything. But I was a working alcoholic, a functioning alcoholic, right? So I needed to have at least 1 or 2 drinks a day in order to have a good night's sleep. That's what I call a functioning alcoholic. I will never get drunk, but I needed the alcohol to go through the day. So the Lord started to decompose my life in front of my eyes and make me realize that it's because of that I was having this horrible behavior. And that's what my doctor said, by the way, exactly what you said. That does not excuses you from your horrible decisions. Because he said, if that was the case, we wouldn't have pedophiles in jail because they have multiple personality disorders, for example. They are still responsible. But now that you know where the root cause is, now you can treat it and kill it. You just don't cover the symptoms. No, you go to the root of the problem and you take it out of your heart. And then you are completely free. That's what I am experiencing now. People tell me, you are in so much peace. Like, why wouldn't I be in peace? I've been healed.
Yeah.
I don't even drink coffee anymore.
That's amazing. I'm at 1 cup a day, but yes, I do think that it's, always too, you think about so many things in life where we don't, we see someone as a problem, not as a solution. We see something that, somebody's doing and, we judge it, and we judge it harshly. In some ways, I think because we're so afraid to sort of open that side of ourselves and say, well, what if that was me? And again, it doesn't mean people aren't responsible and accountable, and I've been thinking about that a lot with, things like, a spike in crime or people breaking into people's cars or graffitiing a small business's property. It just breaks my heart because I'm like, do you realize how hard that person's working? And now you have put a financial burden on them that they don't deserve. And you've done it because of your own gain and your own impulse or whatever. And I think so I do think people should be accountable for those things.
Of course.
But we also have to create a community where nobody is going to stand by and watch it happen and not say something, or nobody is going to, say, well, that doesn't matter. And you can't just say, well, that person had a lot of trauma, so we have to let them off the hook. It's like, no, that person had a lot of trauma. They need help, and they need to be responsible, whether that's through restitution or something else, because that is part of the healing. That is part of, and that's what I saw too in my early work. And, as part of the healing is that giving back and that reciprocity as humans. And I think one of the things I love about the Habitat model is that it is sort of, certainly we're partnering with these families and making these homes happen, and they are becoming homeowners, but then they are paying it forward by we've never had a default in a mortgage. We've never had people really damage their property, these kinds of things that make a difference because they're setting the reputation of what it means to have a Habitat community in your community, what it needs to have a Habitat homeowner in your community. And, and the bar is very high and people raise to it. And so I think that, for me, seeing that happen and knowing that that's possible, and then so part of our work is trying to remove those other barriers. And I think in my career, what I've seen, whether it's been with young people or, people in a workforce program who are trying to better their lives for themselves, for their families, for their children. And a lot of it is about finding this balance between their spiritual life, between their community life, and between their work, that they, can thrive in all areas. So we don't have one area where we're really sick and another area where we're sort of, usually when that happens, everything else is not so hot either, but people fool themselves, right? And I think, your story of like, especially if you have resources, it's, my mom used to have a saying that said, what did she say? She said, being poor isn't, it doesn't define you or something, basically. But if you have wealth, it basically helps you, solve your problems in a different way, right? Because you have resources to do that. And so I think that that's kind of the difference too, is like if a middle class or an upper middle class person has a problem, they can pay somebody to help them figure that out, right? When you're poor and you're deciding between whether you're going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or if you're just going to have breakfast and dinner, or if your kid's going to be able to play soccer, so that means that you have to take a night job and be able to make that extra $300 or $400 a month to pay those fees, like those are different choices. And so I think it's sort of if you have a lot of privilege and wealth, you don't really think about that stuff. You're like, oh, that's, kind of expensive, but I'm still going to do it, right? Or, something. And I think about that with my own kids, like, I remind them a lot, like you had a lot of trials and tribulations, yes, and you had a lot of privilege. And so use your privilege for good. Use your privilege to be happy. Use your privilege to help others, be happy. Help level the playing field for others so that the world can be better, because the world needs a lot of healing.
That's beautiful. And Maureen, you touched on a great point. If you look at our society, we go into cycles, and it's because for example, we went through a terrible First and Second World War, and then we experienced plenty, and the countries grew in wealth, and it was beautiful. And then people got complacent, right? Mm-hmm. And then everything started to go down, right? And then everything started to go back up again. So now our kids, like, I wish, when I see the behavior of our kids, I'm talking about Gen Z, right? Like the young adults, like the 19-year-olds, the 20-year-olds, the decisions that they are making. I'm like, I wish I could take all of these kids and send them to North Korea for 3 months. Send them to Iran for 3 months. Send them to Venezuela for 3 months and then come back, just so that they could appreciate. The problem is when you have a sense of entitlement in your life, mm-hmm. that's when everything starts breaking down.
Yeah.
The people that receive your houses, Maureen, they behave that way because they have a sense of gratitude in their heart. They know that they are getting blessed, and they are one of a few in a million that are getting that opportunity. So they will actually not going to take advantage of that. They have to. But that's the gratitude part. And you see it, right? After what happened after the Great Depression, we went into war, and after war, we went into abundance. And the abundant people knew how to work because they came from the Depression, but then they didn't want to have it as hard for their kids. And their kids didn't want to have it as hard for their kids. And then we're here.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a whole bunch of spoiled young adults that they don't know what it takes to make a living.
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem. And then but then what I also see is that we have a bunch of really smart young people who have a lot of really good ideas, and we don't want to listen to them because we think they're, entitled and they don't get it. And so it is a balance.
It's a balance, right?
Yes, exactly. And I do think, that, I have just never met a group of young people that I'm smarter than. I mean, they are so brilliant and know so much. They haven't had a lot of experience, and so they need to have some more experience, right? And so that's why I love the partnerships between youth and adults. That's why I love the partnership between people who have had success trying to help their communities get better, because they've figured some stuff out and they can help people figure it out. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, the thing I love about Habitat and our homeowners too, is they're not entitled. They're not looking for a handout. They're not looking for somebody to figure it out or do something for them. They're willing to put in the work and do it. And they also feel blessed, and they also are ready to give back. They volunteer 8 times more than the average person in their community.
Wow.
Like, just these things that they do that we've tracked through evaluation at our affiliate that are so powerful. And, it's so, I just want it, that's why I want it to be more of a model. I want it to be more important for communities to say, we want affordable home ownership. So if we're going to give money to housing, let's open the door and expand it. It's not going to be for everyone, but for the 8 homes I talked about in San Francisco, we had 500 applicants. I mean, it's just, and all of my colleagues across the country are experiencing this, and in Canada as well. They get more people that want the opportunity. They're ready to step up or ready to be in that place. And then there's just not enough opportunity. So we've got to work together to create more. And I think the other thing is just to remember that, even for the people that don't end up getting it or don't, get in the lottery, they're on a path for themselves that they're trying to change their condition, and they're going to do it. It may not be with our door, it may be someone else's door, but they're going to keep going. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember about the human spirit is, like, we are indomitable. So we need people to believe that, they can make something better for themselves. But we do have to create the conditions for that to exist in our communities.
And that's like going back and maybe probably closing already this podcast. I don't want to abuse your time. It's going back to what I said at the beginning. We have the blessing to be in one of the parts of the world where freedom is still here, where our laws protects the freedom of society, where my freedom stops where your freedom starts. And there is not many countries like that in the world anymore.
Right.
And we keep that, and we can maintain that, and we look at the foundations of these 2 countries, and if you realize that they are built on the 10 Commandments, which is about respect and the right of private property, that's what creates freedom. And that's what you're doing, and right? Like, going back to the kids, yes, we have a lot of kids that are entitled, but it's our fault because we are the parents of those kids, number 1. Number 2, you and I grew up in a world where the technology wasn't here yet. Right. I saw the first cell phone. I saw the first modem for the internet. Like, it was beautiful, but it wasn't harming yet. Right. These kids, they are born with a cellular phone in their hand, and this, if you don't control it, is the door to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk about access to pornography, for example.
Yes.
Like a 5-year-old can get access to that horrible stuff if parents are not watching. So
Yeah.
the growing as a kid in this world, in this day and age, is 100 times harder than you and I had it.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I feel for parents because it is really hard. And I think just it, and we're such a call out culture and we're so fast to judge everybody and we're so quick to decide what's right and wrong or what is and isn't. And, that's why I think it's sort of like we need these opportunities to do what we're doing, talk about what we can do, see what we can do. And, I always, maybe I'll end with this, which is just, to me, it's like taking this incredible brain we have, this head, and partnering it with our incredible heart that has just vast capacity, and then putting it in with our feet and taking the right actions to make change. And sometimes that's going to make me or you or someone else uncomfortable, but we need to live in that discomfort to create the change we're trying to achieve in the world.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. Maureen, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to ask you one last question before we close this podcast.
Okay.
If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question. I think I would write, be brave, be bold, and take action.
Beautiful. Be brave, be bold, and take action. If people will do that, we will live in a much better society.
I think so. I hope so. But do it with love, not hate.
With love, exactly.
With love. Be bold with love. Be courageous with love, and take action with love. Yes.
Maureen, for the people that are watching, they would like to donate or participate or volunteer in your organization. How can they find you?
Yeah, they can find us at www.habitatgsf.org, or they can go on the habitat.org website and look for any habitat in their local community that they could get involved in. And I don't think they'll be disappointed. I have such amazing, brilliant colleagues across the world doing this work.
Fantastic. Maureen, thank you so much. May God bless you.
Thank you, David. You as well. Bless you. All right. Take care. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, bye.
Blessings.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.